It's the Bird Emergency. I'm Grant Williams. I'm joined today by an ornithologist, Camilo Carniero. And Camilo has been doing, it's long-term research on the Whimbrel. And I was really interested to talk to Camilo because the Whimbrel can be modelled on a bird we've done a lot of talking about, which is the curlew. Now, Whimbrels, let's be clear, are not critically endangered, but the numbers are on the decline. So let's see what we can learn about Whimbrels and their journey. Now, depends which way you look at it. It's either from Iceland to West Africa, or it's from West Africa to Iceland. Hi, Camilo. How are you?
Hi. Good. Thank you. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
It's a great thrill to be speaking to someone who's sitting in Iceland. I think Iceland's one of those places that I think so many people would like to visit for so many reasons. It seems very exotic and remote from where I'm sitting in suburban Melbourne in Australia. What is it like there right now in Iceland?
Right now, it's actually very windy outside, which is not unusual for Iceland. It's a bit cold for the time of the year, but okay. So I guess it's maybe around 10 degrees. Of course, you feel much colder with the wind. Yeah, you were talking about people coming to Iceland and being amazed. And currently there is a volcano, well, an active volcano, and gathering a lot of people. Many people is coming or trying to come to Iceland to see that as well. And it's indeed an amazing place. And for waders, it's almost a paradise.
So let's talk about tourism. There, in probably the last 20 years, there's probably been a real increase in the number of people going to Iceland. It's been easier to get to with the increase in air carriers in Europe. How does that affect the migratory species that spend their summers madly breeding in Iceland? Are the tourists encroaching on the areas where they are breeding?
I wouldn't say so, or at least in the areas where I work. I think the pressure from tourism it's not there, I think. Possibly on particular spots where there are colonies of Arctic terns, for example, which happen to be in a nice place to stop the car and take pictures or something like that, then yes, I guess birds will be disturbed. Yeah, I can think of some places like that, but I don't know exactly in those particular situations how much the birds are disturbed. Yeah, from my experience on my sites, it's fine. Well, they are not on the main road or near any touristic attraction. So the birds are fine in that sense.
Is there much ornithological tourism to Iceland?
I don't know if there is much. There's people coming for birds, of course, because of, I think, harlequin ducks and the Cephalus Boreals golden eye. Maybe that's the name in English, I'm not sure. At least people come for that, I think. But I never heard of ornithological trips organized like a bus full of people or anything like that. Maybe there is, but I'm not aware of.
So that surprises me a little bit. So people aren't looking you up and saying, "Hey, I'm coming to Iceland. Can you show me a good spot?"
No, I don't have anyone like that. But I think it's pretty easy for anyone with interest in birds to get information online where to see birds in Iceland. Well, first, you don't have that many species, and eBird is quite strong in Iceland, I think. So if you are on eBird, then you will see what you want to see where. Basically, of course, for some sensitive species like gyrfalcons and maybe white-tailed eagles as well, and the snowy, then it can be more tricky, but people will find some information online, I think.
Well, you just said there weren't many species. What are they resident species in Iceland?
Yes, there are. I won't know the full list, but for example, talking about waders, there is part of the population of oyster catchers is resident in Iceland, so that they can make some movement within Iceland, from the breeding sites to the wintering sites, but within the country, so short movements, but they stay year-round. It's actually a relatively recent thing. Most are still going away to the UK mostly and Ireland, but part of the population stays in Iceland year-round. I think maybe purples and pipers are also resident. At least they breed, and there are wintering birds, but I don't know if they are the same individuals.
Maybe just young birds or juveniles spending their first winter, didn't get away with the main body of migrants, didn't leave at the same time, perhaps.
Yeah, in the case of oyster catchers, it's really adults and young birds, they stay both. I have colleagues working with the species and particularly on those aspects of partial migration. So they are getting a lot of knowledge on that, on who stays, and I'm trying to understand why some stay, also why some juveniles decide to migrate and others don't. Those sorts of things. It's quite interesting.
With a bird like the snowy owl, is that a resident, or does that come for the summer when there's lots of rodents about or lots of seabird chicks about, and then does it leave?
I actually don't know. Snowy owls, they tend to be quite nomadic, right? In general, I have this idea. Maybe I'm completely wrong on that.
I actually don't know. We don't have many of them here in Melbourne.
Yeah, I suspected so. I think there are maybe a handful in Iceland, if I'm not. So it's not, you can draw big conclusions from that.
No.
But I think at least a pair tends to be breeding in the same area or region when it breeds. But if it goes there only in the summer or not, I don't know. And it's actually a region which in the winter is quite tough. So I wonder if there is anyone going there in the winter to check even.
That's right. Now, do you stay there all year?
No, I've been coming to Iceland since I started my PhD in 2015 during the breeding season. So from May to August, usually mid-August, but now I will stay until the end of August. 4 months, more or less, of the breeding season of Whimbrels. Some other birds start breeding a bit earlier, but for me, that's it.
And way off the track for birds, but is 4 months enough time over, what are we talking, 6 years, 7 years to learn Icelandic?
It would be maybe for another person, but not for me. It wasn't. No, of course I get a few words, but I can't even understand if someone speaks to me for a while. So it wasn't possible for me.
No, and Iceland is just one of those places that, as I mentioned, just seems so far away and so foreign. I haven't seen anything, obviously, for real, but when it's depicted on TV, and even when you see documentaries on shorebirds or something, migratory birds, are there trees there?
Yes, there are. I'm about to say, unfortunately, there are, but yes, there are. And that's actually that might be a problem. It will be a problem if they keep planting trees and forests. A problem for waders, for breeding waders, or for most. Some, like the common snipe, might like it, but for most, it can become a problem. Yes.
Now, so that raises a question. Are they re-establishing ancient forests, or are trees being planted where they haven't really been before? What's the purpose of the tree planting?
So I don't know many details. I know that some part of the trees planted are a native species, which I can't remember the English name. It's a betel tree, but they do plant species that are not native, which grow faster. And And the reason for planting trees or forests, at least for me, it's not clear. Of course, I don't read the Icelandic news, but what I get from my Icelandic colleagues, it's not clear. But they claim to be for timber production and climate mitigation. But I wonder if that's the whole story, or if there is anything else happening behind the scenes. The reason for it to happen.
And what are the dangers, as you alluded to, the problems that could present themselves with a significant reforestation on Iceland?
Most waders, they breed in the lowlands of Iceland, and it's where the forestation is taking place. So it takes, of course, you plant a forest, so you immediately take space from waders, and then you take that space plus, there is an edge effect, because most species tend to avoid nesting next to a forest for safety. That should be the reason why. But they tend to nest further from the forest. So if you plant even a small patch, then you take that patch, and some area around of habitat is also lost for waders, although it might look good. And of course, with every small patch, you take a bit, and then you take a bit more, and so on. So you take a few trees of whimbrel and snipe, and maybe not snipe, but of golden plover and oyster catcher here, and a few more there, and across the landscape, then at some point, it will be a problem.
Okay, let's talk whimbrels. What got you fascinated with?
I think it was when I knew about these two behaviors that so in autumn, as you mentioned, the species naturally breeds mostly in Iceland, and they mostly spend the winter in West Africa. Most of the birds go to West Africa to spend the winter. And when I knew that some individuals in autumn, they all fly directly to West Africa, which is already amazing. Flying over the ocean for 4 or 5 days without stopping is amazing. Maybe not so much if you compare with the Parrots on your side of the world, but it's still amazing for me. And but in spring, there are these two distinct behaviors in which there were some individuals flying straight to Iceland again, and others making a stopover, spending a week or 2 weeks at a stopover site in the UK or Ireland, and then flying to Iceland. And this is quite different behavior. So there are some birds arriving much earlier, possibly when conditions are not so favorable. They might get some cold spells and those sort of weather events. The others are staying in milder conditions for a while and then jumping to Iceland. And then there was this, knowing about this, I was quite interested in that. And then there was the possibility to explore this further, to track more birds, and go down that road and try to link different stages along the year, see how they interact, how individuals that do one behavior or strategy do comparing to others that have a different behavior, and those sorts of things. And that's how I went down that road, and it was really cool.
Now, Whimbrels in the same family, the same genus as the curlews. There's 2 Whimbrels, is that right?
I don't know the English name of all of them, maybe. You have the Eskimo Whimbrel, or was it Eskimo curlew? I don't know.
Eskimo curlew, and they're
okay.
and they're no longer here. And then we've got the Eurasian curlew and the Far Eastern curlew.
Yeah, I don't know if there is another one called Whimbrel as well. Well, they're all mannish, but
there's a Whimbrel and there's a little Whimbrel, as I understand it.
Yes.
And then there's So I think that's what we in English would refer to as Whimbrels. So let's see, which species arrive in Iceland?
Which species arrive in Iceland?
Yeah.
Of that genus?
Yes.
Or it's only Whimbrel?
Start with them. Only the Whimbrel.
There are a few curlews even nesting, I think a handful of pairs, but I actually don't know. Perhaps they even stay year-round, those few birds. I don't know. But in numbers, such as Whimbrels and other waders, it's the only one of the genus. Yeah.
Now, do Whimbrel breed also in other parts of Scandinavia, or do basically the whole population head to Iceland, or are they spread over, say, Russia as well?
Yeah, you have Whimbrel all around. You have different subspecies. Here, it's the Icelandic subspecies, which also has part of it in Greenland, the Faroe Islands, and I think in some islands of Scotland, maybe even mainland. Then you have the 5 species in northern Scandinavia, and it can go into Russia. And then there is a debate on actually how many subspecies there are, and even if the Icelandic is a species or not, and all those sorts of things. But you have populations all around the subarctic and maybe a bit even into the Arctic. And then they all go south, of course, for the wintering. And the Axillaris, I think they also nest, maybe not even in the subarctic, but southern, that's somewhere where I think it's not even known very well.
That's part of the mystery that you're helping to unlock, where they go and when they go there. So when did you start working with Whimbrels, and what was the scope of your first project?
So I started in 2015, and as I mentioned, I was trying to figure out how different behaviors throughout the year might influence individuals, might influence their fitness differently. And by behaviors around the year, the migratory strategy, for example, where they go in the winter, when they migrate, if they stop or not, when they arrive into Iceland, when they breed, those sorts of things. So I was tracking. So I had a part of work in Iceland, of field work in Iceland, in which I would follow all the breeding season. I would find the nests and catch the birds while nesting, put the small geolocators on a flag on the legs, and then follow the nest fate or the family fate. So some would act, others wouldn't, and then the chicks would fledge or not. So I will know all of the breeding part of it, and then the bird would migrate, do whatever they do, go to West Africa, come back, and then they come back to the same place to breed, or most of them at least. And then I would find the nest again and catch it again, take the geolocator, get the data of the period when I was not looking at the bird, basically, so that I will know when it migrated, where it went, when it came back, if it stopped on the way back to Iceland or not, so that I could have information on all the stages or most of the stages of the annual cycle. And then I did that for several individuals so that I could look at the patterns on that. Yeah, it actually sounds easier said than done. Well, the catching part and all of that can be tricky.
Just going to ask you how do you catch them?
Yeah, so they nest on the ground. And most of the times I was using a spring trap, basically a square around the nest. And when the bird sits on the nest, it triggers and makes a tent and the bird is trapped. Well, it's not straight like this. I would take the real eggs and put dummy eggs just to prevent them from breaking the eggs. Because sometimes, of course, they are stressed and they jump until I get to the trap to take them. So I would be careful in that way. Yeah, and usually this is not so difficult the first time, but then they learn. And in the following years, and I was also trying to do this on the same birds over the years. So that I would have individual variation over time on some birds. And then it gets, that's when it gets difficult. Not only catching, because they know something is wrong, and then they know what is wrong, but also finding the nests of birds that know that I'm looking for the nest. Then it takes time and patience.
So a couple of questions out of that. One is, what's the average clutch size?
Yeah, it's 4 eggs. Most of the times they lay 4 eggs. Sometimes they lay 3, and they might lay 2 as well, but it's rare. And I think when you see 2 eggs or even 3, unless they are laying, the incubation stage is still at its start, then you can't be 100% sure that it wasn't predated right before you found the nest, for example, partially predated. But they should lay 4 eggs. That's the thing.
And have you collected enough information to know out of the 4 eggs what the fledging success usually is?
Not out of the 4 eggs, because when the fledging success data I collected was mostly if a pair fledged a chick or chicks or not. So it was binary, yes or no.
Yeah, yes.
And the reason for that, I have data for some families. I know, it was at least 2 chicks or 3 chicks that fledged. But sometimes I don't have that information because when the chicks are about to fledge, they run faster, they hide better. So I couldn't always be sure of how many chicks were around by then. But I knew if they were about to fledge and when they would fledge as well. And it's not always necessary to really see the chicks, although most of the times I would see, and also because I would go often to the sites to verify. But the parents' behavior also gives it away if they have chicks to take care of or not. As soon as you arrive, if a pair has lost a family since the last visit, it's because the birds don't react when you arrive at the field. Yes, and that's a nice thing, or that I enjoyed about this fieldwork, getting this, knowing about this behavior and being able to read the birds and what's happening by their behavior. And it's the same with finding nests. It was clear for me that on my second field season, I was much better at finding nests because I could immediately see, this bird, it has something because it's walking differently, more sneaky, those sorts of things, which I didn't see in my first field season. That was nice.
You're learning too. Very good.
Yes.
How long is the average lifespan of a Whimbrel?
I can't remember what's the value for the longevity. I think it's 11 years. I'm not sure. But maybe that's not the longevity. It's the generation length value. But I think the record is a bird with 24 years old. I think it's a record on the BTO, the British Trust of Ornithologists list. Yeah. We don't have any birds so old, but even 2 days ago, I saw a bird, actually 2 birds that start being followed, actually with geolocators, on 2012. And if we assume that they come back when they are 2 years old, then they were born on 2010, which makes them, 11 years old at least, which is already impressive.
Definitely. I'm not sure whether you'll have data for this one either, but do all of the family migrate to the same place?
No.
Okay. Let's talk about the routes that they do take and let's backtrack. What did you hope to find out when you started your first piece of work? And then what did you develop it into? And then tell us the things that surprised you or anything that was confirmed. with your studies?
Yeah, that's quite a broad question. I don't know exactly what was I expecting specifically, because several aspects were really exploratory. I was, for example, expecting that the breeding success or the fledgling success would decrease with time of laying. So the later birds start breeding, the lower the breeding success tends to be. Well, it's more or less a general thing, and I could confirm that on this population, which is good to know, because then we know that the migration timing in spring particularly can influence the output, at least indirectly, because a late bird will arrive late into Iceland, and it will tend to lay and breed later as well. So it will pay a cost for being late. But yeah, I don't see anything that was like a very unexpected thing. But for example, I wasn't expecting, which was not part of the plan at all, when I was doing my winter fieldwork in the Bankberga, basically doing observations of foraging behavior of Whimbrels. I wasn't expecting to see them eating bloody cockles, which are very big bivalves. And they weren't eating the whole thing. These are really strong and with thick shells. But they were, I think, taking all dying or freshly dead cockles from the mudflats and taking them at possibly an important rate. And this is basically a lot of flesh. So it might be an important food item, which it wasn't described. It wasn't known, so I wasn't expecting to see that. But at some point I saw one doing it and another one. And that was unexpected and a nice behavior to observe.
We always hear about the birds feeding at their wintering grounds, but are they also doing a lot of feeding when they're at their breeding grounds?
Yes, naturally they will need to eat. I haven't been looking at that at all. So I've been focused on finding nests and finding more nests and catching the birds and all of those things. So I can't even tell how long they take per day for foraging or other activities besides incubating the eggs. We know that they can make some movements away from the nesting territory, possibly and presumably for foraging. That's the most likely situation. So they don't stay around the nest foraging and then go and incubate and just live in that small patch. It seems that they actually need way more space than we might think at first. So it's not only the territory that they need, they might go someplace a few kilometers away for foraging and come back, both while incubating and with chicks. So sometimes it might be only one parent taking care of the chicks for some time. So that foraging behavior is actually something that we might need to look into, and we will eventually. If not me, some other colleagues will do. But they do forage. Of course, they eat different things. For example, these birds that I follow in the wintering sites, and it's the same for other birds anyway. They eat mostly crabs and fiddler crabs. And here it will be other invertebrates, but not crabs for sure. It's inland that they breed. And they also take crowberries, and other types of berries, but mostly crowberries. So it's a different diet in maybe a third of the year, and then a different diet on the rest of the time.
Do both parents incubate?
Yes, they share that duty.
Okay. And when there's people around, do they exhibit any behaviours similar to, say, plovers, distraction behaviour or anything like that to keep you away from the nest?
Yeah, it's not usual, but a few individuals do that sort of broken wing display and some weird things. It's not like plovers, but most of the times they don't. And that's another that was another interesting thing for me to experience, that the personality of the individuals was really different. Some birds, when I see the nest and I go to the nest, some birds stay around and others move way further, almost to places where I can't see them. So it seems that some are way bold than others. And some will do this broken wing or display, but mostly they don't. They either stay walking and looking or just go away.
Just impatiently waiting for you to do your thing and then nick off?
Yeah, I guess so.
Tapping their feet, going, come on, get on with it. The birds take which route? Do they come down around the Iberian Peninsula from Iceland and then disperse down the west coast of Africa, or do they come through that Middle East flyway?
No, so these birds from Iceland, they go pretty much straight in a straight line, roughly to West Africa, or those that go. There are a few that go to Iberia, and it's the same. It's over the ocean, more or less straight. Of course, they can drift slightly with the wind. We don't know if it's really drifting with the wind, but yeah, it's not, of course, completely straight, but more or less, and it's over the ocean. In spring, a few will do the opposite direction, and others, there will be some that apparently follow the coast. Well, with the geolocators, this is not very accurate, but some might follow the coast to the stopover place, while others can seem that they really go over the ocean, and then when they reach the latitude of the British Isles and Ireland, they just stop and then continue after a few days. Those are their routes.
And how far south do any of the birds venture?
Yeah, so the Icelandic subspecies, there are records of birds in Benin, I guess it's the name, and Togo. So they can go to the Gulf of Guinea. And these are records from metal rings recovered, I don't even know when. From the birds that I tracked, they all went to the region of Guinea-Conakry, to spend the winter on those huge mudflats and mangroves. And
are those sites in danger of being reclaimed for other development?
I only know about Carneiro, which is where I did my fieldwork and I visited on other occasions. And I think they will be fine for now. Of course, this is not only Whimbrels. There are many other waders using the mudflats. Well, this is a huge archipelago with when the tide goes down, it's huge areas of mudflats with food for the birds. And I would say that they will be fine for the time being. On those islands, there are the locals, they use the mudflats as well to extract bivalves and possibly other things. But I don't think they disturb the birds that much. So I think it's okay. And I didn't hear of any big project or plan to claim some land or those sorts of things.
Build a luxury hotel.
Yeah. No, so I think it will be okay, but maybe I'm wrong, and maybe other people that has been there more recently and spending more time, maybe they have a different view.
Are there, it's probably outside your experience, but just popped into my mind, are there local ornithologists, local biologists, ecologists in Guinea-Bissau and, say, Togo, Benin, who are interested in the shorebirds, the migratory birds that visit their territories?
I can speak about Guinea-Bissau, and I guess you can count with your hand how many ornithologists there are. And usually we don't get any, for example, any sightings of color-marked birds from local people. So if I would have to say yes or no, there are people, but there isn't enough people to go to the field and make bird lists and look at birds and really collect many data as in other places. It's also because I'm thinking about the which these people, they live in the mainland. So to go to archipelago, there is already a small barrier that you have to take the ferry or take another boat or those sorts of things. But there is a local institute that manages the protected areas. There are many protected areas, and there is work going on. And it's not only done by foreigners. Also the locals, they develop their own projects and those sorts of things.
Just got me thinking there, Camilo, after you publish your work, is there an effort made to distribute the work to local authorities in a form that they can understand and digest to help them or encourage them to be interested and to perhaps be actively managing? Or once the scholarly work is done and published, does it really sit there and only ornithologists are finding out what?
So my papers from the PhD, they are not, how to say this, they're not conservation driven. So I don't propose conservation measures or those sorts of things.
No, they're just factual findings. They're just...
and usually I don't discuss things, or I didn't discuss things in the conservation or from the conservation perspective.
The threats and whatnot, it's just what the birds did.
But I do make an effort to communicate the findings I make. I did write some blogs for the OU page. So which is basically just try to make a easy summary of the papers. And also there is this very nice blog, Weather Tales, by
Graham,
who is very also writing about my work. And I guess that reaches way more people than my papers. And I will risk and say that it's even more pleasant to read If you're not really into the science, then it's just better to read that. But yeah, I actually wonder, and I guess that my work didn't reach, or at least most of it didn't reach local people in or Mauritania. It did. I'm thinking about the work from the PhD. Yeah, it did a bit, but from direct communication and those sorts of things. But yeah, I didn't write blogs in Portuguese, for example, which is a language they would be more comfortable with in Guinea-Bissau.
It's very difficult, isn't it? Because one of the issues, I guess, is that most of the scientific study is done by visitors from outside, and obviously with a different perspective and different aims with the work. And I guess in so many places that the local people have their knowledge of the birds, but there's not a lot of crossover, just simply because the audiences are so different and the experience with the birds are so different. Those people pumping bivalves are thinking very different things when they see the birds than someone with a research perspective or a bird watching for pleasure perspective. So it's one of the things we've got to bridge. We've got to bridge that for conservation to be successful as pressures increase.
Yes, absolutely. And it's not only a different bird perspective, it's also, and I'm thinking again about the biologist, many people, they live in a very small village in the middle of the forest. So their access to information is also different from ours. So their world perspective is also different. But there is a current project working with waders in the Biologist archipelago. And I know that, the locals are much involved in that. And I know that other projects, I was involved in one before my PhD there, in which I was working with locals and monitoring parrots and doing other things, and also including and always being with locals and trying to transfer what I know to them. So I think every time there is some projects, even by foreigners going on there, the locals are included and there is an effort to transfer knowledge. And techniques and all of that.
It's a two-way process, really, isn't it? Especially, they can probably tell you a lot of things about dietary habits.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Yeah, when I was doing these parrot counts, for example, I was going to the forest to do this, and there was a former poacher. I don't know if you say it like this.
Yep.
Which was converted, going with me to show me the way and places and those sorts of things. And with other type of fieldwork, it happened as well. Of course, it's a two-way process.
Yeah, and the poachers certainly are aware of the behaviours of the birds, because that's how they find them, and that's how they earn their money, or formerly earn their money. It's great. So many projects around the world converting the people behaviours from poaching to protection. It's very good. Your PhD, Camilo, tell us about the process. How long did it take you? Did you get it done in good time? And did you, again, discover anything that surprised you or anything that was really important in that scope of work?
Yeah, I would say that most things were important.
Good.
But I think I didn't fully digest yet the whole process, although I defended 1.5 years ago. But I liked it. It was, of course, stressful sometimes. I don't think it was as stressful as I hear some people saying about their PhDs and having a really bad time and all of that. I have good fun, and most of the time I have good fun. I don't know if this is what you were asking about.
It's really interesting. I haven't been down this track before, but one of my previous guests has recently defended her PhD, and I haven't spoken to her since, but she was really nervous about it. Tell us about the process of defending your PhD and what could go wrong.
Yeah, I think there are a few things that can go wrong. And the defense, it varies from country to country. So in my case, I had to make a presentation of half an hour or so. So it's a public defense. In some places it isn't. So I had to make the presentation, and then I would sit down and the opponents would just discuss things with me. And it took, I think, 2.5 hours, the discussion, which is the maximum that it can take. Of course, it has a limit. And I really enjoyed it, to be honest, because, of course, they were asking things that I didn't think about before, or some of them. So it's a good opportunity to think about new stuff and discuss it with people who are very good in the area. So again, I can't complain. I was, of course, nervous. Any presentation I have to make, I am nervous, and that one was even more important. But for the defense part itself, it wasn't about the presentation. It was about what I had written on the thesis. But it was a good day.
I like how you label them the opposition. So are there people who have read your work and are looking for holes in it, for problems, for inconsistencies, for lack of scientific rigor? What do they put to you?
Yes, I think that's what first my supervisors, they read the document and they suggest, they accept this is well good enough to hand in and to defend later. And then maybe they're not called opponents, but I think they are. Yes, they assess the scientific work that I did, and there are things that won't be perfect, and they can ask, okay, so why did you take this approach? Why didn't you take this other one? Maybe this is a mistake. And then there were more conceptual discussions as well. And but they are looking for something they disagree with to discuss about. Otherwise, it's impossible to write something that something so extensive that another person will fully agree and won't have anything to discuss about.
I'd like to hear from somebody whose defense went wrong. I'd love to know what could go wrong. You would think that your supervisors are keeping you on track the whole time as you go along so that you don't encounter any problems in a public forum. Like, that would be horrifying, I think, on a personal level.
Yes, absolutely. And when I was saying that during my PhD, I had a good time, and I wasn't. Because there are several people saying that they are struggling a lot to go through the PhD. It's a very stressful time, and all of that. And I'm saying this because you mentioned the supervisors, and my supervisors. I think I was lucky that I got great supervisors. I think that can indeed make a difference to basically to have a good time during your PhD, and also to make good science, or at least okay science. I don't know if the one I do is good or okay, but I don't think it's bad. The supervisors, they will make a difference. And in my case, I think the relationship I have with my supervisors, it goes a bit beyond the professional part of being supervised by them. So if I'm working with them for years, then we also develop some friendship. And I think that's an important component to it. And it creates a better understanding between the people, or among the people. Everything flows better. That's my view on it.
And the bird world is quite small. Everybody seems to know each other by reputation, if not personally. So were the opponents to you at your defence, were they people that you knew or knew of?
Yes. Yes, they were. Yes, I had met them all before and talked to them. And one of them is a top researcher in ornithology. Most researchers, but it was a bit of a privilege to be able to get him to dedicate his time to read what I wrote and then discuss it with me. I had the opportunity to discuss with him also after, but I knew them.
No, that's great. Sorry for any listener who's going, when are you going to talk more birds? But I'm interested in the time it takes for you to complete your PhD, Camilo. What do you think the ratio was of fieldwork, collecting and analysing data, and then that task that everyone seems to dread of writing it up and doing all your edits and passing it off to people to mark up for you and then rewriting it? How much time did you spend on the last bit of the process, and how much time was collecting and analysing data?
I never made the calculations for that, but so I started in May of 2015, in May of 2015, and I handed in the thesis on, I think, the last or nearly the last day of August of 2019. And I spent maybe on average 3.5 months in Iceland during the breeding season. And then I did more or less 1 month of wintering fieldwork in Mauritania. And maybe in total 1, or maybe 2 in total in Portugal as well, because there are a few birds wintering there, and I was living there, so I could collect the data more. So I wouldn't have to go to the field and do it more intensively. I would do it, more sporadically. And I don't know how much that adds up, but when I was not in the field, I was analyzing data and writing up. So I could make the calculation, but it got So, sorry, yeah, but one period I remember is the last month. Then yes, of course there was, but I still did some field work on that summer, but I spent August basically only writing, not only writing. So I managed to get myself into a routine of okay, wake up, writing, and then go to the pub in the evening or go for a run. And I guess that really helped to relax at the end of the day and then start over. And then I had a hard deadline because I booked myself to go to Batumi for the raptor count in September. So it couldn't be later than that. And that also helped to, okay, it really can't go over that deadline because otherwise I could be, okay, if I don't finish next week, it's okay, I can take another one and then another one. But I really couldn't then. So that's it.
It sounds like you have extraordinary time management skills, Camilo.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I think I did during that period, but I'm not sure it happens all the time.
No. So where do you see your future now? Staying in research, in fieldwork, or do you have other aspirations to become more of an academic? Are you supervising students now?
Yes, I started supervising 2 master students actually this summer. Yeah, so I started a postdoc now as well, which will last for 3 years. And after that, I don't know. I don't even see the point of making a big plan for what will happen in 3 years because, well, it can backfire basically. And at least right now, I will focus on this for 2 years. And then in the last year of the postdoc, then I will reassess my situation and make some decisions.
And what's the subject of your postdoc work?
Yeah, it's still Whimbrels, but now it will be only in Iceland. I'm not going to West Africa again. And I will be studying trophic interactions between the Whimbrels and their food resources and relating chick growth to the variation and abundance of different food resources. And the reason behind that, so you probably heard about trophic mismatches. Yeah, so sometimes with the warming and the spring onset being earlier and earlier, the food resources, the abundance of the food resources peak earlier than the demand by the birds. So birds, they might arrive too late for that, and then they pay a price in terms of breeding success, and then it can have population implications as well. So I was thinking about that. And why I decided to do it is, well, in Iceland, it's happening, so it's getting warmer. The trend is that it's getting warmer in spring. The onset of spring is advancing, and some waders have been responding to that. I have colleagues that have been studying black-tailed godwits for decades, and they have been advancing their arrival dates in spring. They also have been expanding the distribution in the country, so they have apparently an appropriate response to the changes in the environmental conditions. What happens? Well, sometimes when birds don't respond, it's what I mentioned before. Then they pay a price, and it's not cheap. And the Whimbrels, their timings of migration and timings of breeding and breeding success, or at least timings of migration and timings of breeding, they haven't been changing, possibly for decades. At least timings of arrival for decades, we have data, and they have been arriving on the same schedule every year. Data on breeding success that we have from a few decades ago and the one we collected more recently, it seems that the breeding success is also doing fine, and the population seems to be stable. Although, let me make a parenthesis here that we might have now started seeing small changes on the breeding success and population size based on an index that we have been collecting data here in the south part of Iceland. But anyway, so they have been doing fine, and while the environment around has been changing. And why I think that's happening is because they might rely considerably on crowberries, all the chicks there is. And crowberries, they seem to be super abundant. We don't know the timings of emergency or the peaks or the timings of peak abundance of invertebrates. We don't know the timings of maturation or actual abundance of crowberries. So I'll be collecting that data. But we think that the timings of those might be advancing as has been happening in other places. But because the crowberries, particularly, they are so abundant, Whimbrels, they don't have any need, let's say, to change. Because even if they miss the peak of abundance, there are so many that they don't reach that threshold, so the chicks can grow normally and fly.
I wonder whether the diet is changing. Oh no, the internet. Oh no. I wonder whether there's enough data to know whether the dietary habit of the birds is shifting? Are they becoming more vegetarian because of need? And is that the main adaptation that is happening rather than the timing of the migration?
Yeah, that's an idea that we think that could have happened. It's difficult to grasp it because we should have thought about it 50 years ago and start collecting data. But I will try to get to chick specimens in museums around Iceland. I will see what it's possible to do. And if they are old enough, I will try to figure out that through stable isotopes. So I'll also do that for the chicks now, and possibly it should be possible to see what's the percentage of fruits in the diet now and what it was before. So if we manage to get those samples, then we will have an idea at least.
So let's explain that for people who might not be so scientifically minded as yourself, that by analysing tissue, or it's feathers, I think, isn't it?
The feathers should work, yes.
So by analysing the composition of the feathers, you can identify isotopes, the part of the atomic structure of the foods that the bird has eaten are then, through the bodily processes, translocated into the feathers. So there's a different isotope that's present in a different concentration for eating, if they've been eating berries, as against if they've been eating worms or centipedes or shellfish or whatever. Have I got that?
Yes,
have I explained that right?
Yes, perfectly. Yes, it's exactly that. Yeah, and another thing that I'll try to tackle is the preparation for the autumn migration part, the fueling part of autumn migration. And if we assume, and if that's the situation, that the peak of abundance of berries has been advancing, even though they are super abundant during the growth period, then they might not be so abundant later when they are fueling up for this 6,000 kilometers flight. And we don't even know how much important the berries are for fueling the flight for juveniles, or we don't know. So I'll be looking into that as well to see if even the late chicks will have enough food to fuel their flight, or if there will be some differences in which the early chicks will be fine and then the late chicks will struggle more to fuel up for the following flight.
And the analysis of the feathers and the stable isotope analysis gives you the opportunity to review specimens that could be several hundred years old from all over the range if they are held in museums the way along the migration path.
Yeah, I will. Yes, I will start with it's possible to gather in Iceland and take it from there. Yes, I still have many things that I need to decide. I just started, so there are many ideas that need to be refined along the way, and possibly some dropped and others will come. Well, it's normal process.
Okay, so I'm able to give you a feather. What do you do with it?
Well, it depends on which feather it is and from which bird.
Okay,
it's a juvenile feather. It's an adult feather. When was it collected?
Okay. All that information's on the specimen tags, but I'm interested in. I pluck a feather from my 200-year-old of a juvenile that didn't get away on time, or somebody shot it and then decided not to eat it. Who knows? However, it went. But I give you a feather, and it's a beautiful feather from the breast. What do you do with it? How do you treat it? How do you extract the isotopes? Are they just sent away to a lab? Like how?
Yeah, that's probably what will happen. So to do this type of analysis, it has to be some technician with some fancy machine and those sorts of things in the lab.
But you don't chop up a bit of the feather. There's not a special part of the feather that. Yep.
No, I could do that myself. There is part of the process which is putting the material in small capsules, which is some delicate work. So I could do that part, but then the rest is the lab doing, or I could just take the feather and send to the lab and everything is done there. But I wouldn't be doing any spectacular thing myself with a feather, if that's the question. Yeah. Maybe the results will be more interesting.
Yeah. You're becoming a botanist already with your analysis of the berries, and then you put your white coat on and you do the agitation of the sample and the separating of the materials in the vial. Very interesting. So how have you got this upcoming project?
Yeah, it's 3 years. It's 3 field seasons. So for example, for variation in a peak abundance of resources over time, it won't be enough to draw much conclusions on that, but it will be enough to tackle other aspects, and maybe it will open doors to investigate further. Let's see.
But will it be enough to learn Icelandic for when you're going down to the pub?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Do you have to pretend to like beer?
No, not at all.
Very good. I wondered whether they're that tribal about Björk in Iceland.
No, never noticed that.
No. Haven't seen her walking around the fields disturbing your birds?
No, fortunately not.
Very good. All right, let's talk a bit more about your general birding. As a kid in Portugal, did you grow up in Lisbon, or are you from the cornfields?
No, I'm from the north, from a small town not very far from Porto, and I didn't bird when I was a kid. I started birding maybe right after my degree in biology. So I started getting interested in birds at the end of the degree, and right after, I did the degree in biology. I went to Mauritania to work with fish, but this was during the winter mostly, and you have loads of waders wintering there. So I think it's when it started more. But I'm not. I think it varies. Some periods I'm birding much more, and others I'm not birding almost at all. And I don't know.
So you didn't get lured into birding by somebody else while you were in Mauritania? It was just that the waders were present while you were working on fish, and you were going, they're a bit more interesting.
No, I think it was a bit, in the last year of the degree, some sort of field trips with some professors, which were also interested in birds. I think that's when it started. If I would have to pinpoint, it would be there. Because, when I went to Mauritania, I got beans with me already. Yeah.
Hello, Mauritania. I've got a soft spot from here because right from the start, they've been listening to the show. Somebody there, which is great. What's your favourite bird, Camilo?
Yeah, I don't have favourites in general. I don't know. It's just I don't elect a favourite in most of the situations. Yeah, but if you would really make me say something, then I guess it would be the Whimbrel, just because of
familiarity.
Yes, and there is a certain kind of understanding that I have about the birds, at least in the breeding sites, their behavior and those sorts of things, that I would probably have to say the Whimbrel. Yes.
Now you said you don't have favourites, so I have to test that. Do you follow a football team?
No.
It's very good. So where's your favourite location that you've been? And let's broaden it out from just birding to your nature-based experience. What's your favourite location?
Yeah, again, I don't have a favourite. But still when I go out, it's for birding. And I don't know, I don't have any specific place that I'm like I try to go every week or any kinds of those things.
But even just in your experience, Guinea-Bissau sounds pretty amazing.
Yes, and it is. Yeah. But there I can't go there often. So I have moved to Estonia recently, and there are several places in Estonia, for example, that are really good nature-wise. I think about the Matsalu National Park, for example. Well, there are several spots in that national park that are very good for birding. There is a migration watch place in one of the islands, which is also very good sea watching. But I don't have a favorite. I can't tell you, okay, it's this location.
And is there somewhere on a list that you just really want to get to?
Not really. I guess I would like to go to places that have species that I would like to see, for example. But I don't have a list with, okay, next trip is to this place for sure, or anything like that. Maybe it's also because I'm fortunate enough to be able to do field work in places, and then end up visiting them. So I guess if I would have a need for a fix of going to a place for birding, then I already got it with work.
You're pretty content, aren't you?
I guess so.
Life's good.
Well, not all the time, but I can't complain.
Definitely, that's great. I was hoping that you would say, penguins. I want to go to the other end, the other cold end, and have a look at some penguins. But no special love of parrots after your work with parrots in Africa? No?
Not really. My work with them was, so I was basically doing morning counts of Timne parrots in this small island in the Vigigaus archipelago. So that's my work with the parrots. It wasn't Yeah, it was just going a few hours by dawn into the forest and stay there and count the parrots and go back to the wild. So yeah, I guess I couldn't grow much love for parrots.
Do you still like fish?
Yes.
Yeah. So are you a diver? You just see them on your plate. And is that what everyone eats in Iceland? Fish and more fish?
Oh, no, there's also a lot of lamb and yes.
Do they have a livestock industry that's prevalent? Is the lamb homegrown lamb? Is that one of the threats on the way?
I think the lambs themselves, I don't think they will be a threat. Actually, I think they have been having less lambs, which means they don't graze so much. So you get taller vegetation, which is not so good for most waders. But they do have cow for dairy products. So they do a lot of agriculture with hay fields to then feed them in the winter. And yes, the expansion of the hay fields might influence waders as well.
I just remembered a question I wanted to ask you way back in the beginning. What are the predators there? Do they have, is it rats and mice, or do they have things like weasels and stoats? Or
no. Yeah, so the only native land mammal, is the Arctic fox. But unfortunately, the American mink was introduced. So there are a few around as well. And that's it for mammals. Other things eating wader chicks and are ravens, skuas, Arctic skuas, greater black-backed gulls, lesser black-backed gulls.
Oh, yeah.
And they aren't enough to make any damage.
Being silly. All right. I think we've got to the end. Oh, I didn't ask you about the field guide. What field guide are you using?
The Collins Bird Guide by Lastra. Yeah. For this region is what you need.
And if you have to go to Africa?
I can't remember. It's birds of West Africa. I can't even remember the name, and I can't remember the authors. I'm sorry, but it's a Christopher Helm guide.
They always come up with good names for field guides, don't they? Really inventive names. The birds of West Africa, or the birds of the British Isles. That's one of the best. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Thanks so much for speaking to me, Camilo. I feel like I'm being a bit silly.
Thank you.
Because it's so early in the morning now. I'm feeling
No, it's all right.
And I hope we can catch up another time and see what you've learned in the post, and if there's anything that, in terms of management, that the authorities, the powers that be, need to get from your work. And actually, where do you get all the geolocators? Always worries me. Is your study limited by the amount of geolocators that you can get?
Yeah, so all of that part of finances and getting the equipment during my PhD was done by my supervisors. But yeah, geolocators, they are not, if you compare with other tracking technologies, they are quite cheap. So it wasn't too complicated to get those, but it was through, I think, mostly Icelandic funding.
Very good.
Yeah, I can't say for sure because it didn't go through me.
It's good. Your supervisors are doing their job. Very good. Very good.
Yes, they did. Yeah.
And last question, I promise. Do you have to seek funding? Like, does the university have to find partners to ensure that your work can keep going? Because it's a nice long study, not yours particularly, but the ongoing study of Whimbrel in Iceland is really valuable because it is long. Is the university looking for cooperative partners?
No, I don't know, but so my supervisors they started working with Whimbrels, and then I think I took it to expand it. So I was dedicated only to that, and they were not before. They were exploring some stuff. Yeah, so I was taking that for during the PhD and a bit more. And now I applied with these postdoc ideas. I applied for a grant to do it, and I didn't get it the first try. Fortunately, I got it the second time I applied, so a year later, and it's Icelandic funding. So I will have a salary for 3 years and a bit of fund for the equipment I need and those sorts of things. Yeah, and that's it. But in 3 years' time,
you'll be looking around again for another opportunity.
Yes,
that's right.
Yes, I'll be looking around in 2 years' time already because it takes time. But it's how it works. That's
right. And that's for people who aren't in the academic world, need to understand that you can't really do any long-term planning because
it's very difficult.
Your grant's fixed term, and before it runs out, you need to be looking for your next one, so you know what you're doing for the next part of your life. So very different to 9 to 5 work. Very different.
Yes.
So Thanks, Camilo. All the
Well,
best.
thank you.
I can't wish your football team luck because you're very consistent and a favourite. That's been the Bird Emergency. I'm Grant Williams, and I hope you'll join us again on the next episode. Bye for now.